Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, your definitive leadership growth podcast gives you an opportunity to learn and grow from people that are in many different verticals of business. They've had tons of successes. They've had most of them just as many failures. That's how we do. We persevere, we keep moving forward, and we keep conquering life and leadership. So today is no different. I'm very excited. I have Kashif Khan. He's the best-selling author of The DNA Way. He's a celebrity longevity coach, founder of the DNA company, and a two-time TEDx speaker. He's plus, we sat and chatted for just a minute before, an all-around good guy. He's a pioneer in driving a functional approach to genomic interpretation, overlaying environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and your genetic blueprint to create personalized longevity plans. And certainly if you're here longer, you gain more wisdom and you have the opportunity to grow into a better leader. So I bring Mr. Kashif Khan on the show today. Kash, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here, man.
Absolutely, man. Hey, do me a favor, if you would, just share a little bit about your background. What's your leadership, your management style, maybe a little bit of your upbringing. I know you do a lot of one-on-one coaching. You do some group coaching. I'll make sure as you're chatting here to share your Instagram, and I'm going to give a shout out early because I easily forget to do that. You can follow Kashif on at Kash Khan Official on Instagram. That's KASHKHAN Official, OFFICIAL. So you can check that out on Instagram. So Kash, if you would just take the reins and share a little bit about your background and yourself and leadership in life, man.
Yeah, so where I am at today is nowhere near where I thought I was going to be. I do not come from the biotech industry. I have no formal training, no education in this world. And I think that is exactly what was needed, was a layperson who was sick in building another business, like literally physically sick, multiple medications from multiple doctors, needing the tool to actually work. So no longer going to a clinician, asking them, why am I sick? And just getting told, here's a prescription. We don't really answer that question. We just tell you how to manage it. And
Sure.
sort of being self-taught in that. So started going way back when. I've always been entrepreneurial, starting while I was in school, building a landscaping company and selling it literally before I even graduated high school, and always taking this entrepreneurial path where, and by the way, now that I understand my unique genetic wiring, I am wired to be an entrepreneur, and I now know how to detect that in the genome. So it was meant to be. And so I built multiple companies. In my late 30s, I got very sick, migraines, eczema, depression, gut issues, couldn't function. And that's what drove me down this journey of discovering personalized health for myself, because all of the standard allopathic answers didn't work. And here I am now today, where I think it's moved far beyond what do I do, but it's more a sense of purpose, that it's so rewarding and so powerful and so impactful that I literally don't even run my own company anymore. Hired a CEO so I could do more of this and advocate and make sure the world knows there's something they can do.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can see from people is it's something that affected you. And so obviously with the combination of your entrepreneurial spirit and then the fact that you're like, hey, I can affect change, in a big way. So what are some one thing, and I know it's the sort of the tongue in cheek, right? I've heard it said like that's why they call it practicing medicine, is because that's
Yeah.
one of my frustrations too. Is you go to a doctor and they tell you, like even for myself, we talked briefly beforehand. I had COVID very bad in 2021, and then for a couple of years I fought to
Mm.
make this comeback. And you'd go to the doctor and they're like, nah, man, on paper, you look great. You're super healthy. And I'm like, I don't feel super healthy.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage somebody? What if somebody's in that leadership role? Do you and they're saying, or just even for themselves, they're saying, hey, I'm feeling this illness. I feel like something's right or not right. Where does somebody start? Because when you're talking about
Yeah.
like the DNA blueprint and so forth, we get trained as society to listen to, well, they're trained professionals, they're doctors, so you got to listen to them. Where do you start to maybe deviate off of that standard path to say, no, hey, there's something else here, there's something more, and I need to break through it?
Well, start by knowing that the number 3 cause of death in the United States is medical error. It's a number 3 reason
Wow.
people die, and the vast majority of that has to do with prescription drugs. So if the training is so great, why are they killing so many people? Now, the
Wow.
solution, our Western healthcare system is really good at solving emergencies, acute care. Break an arm, stage 4 cancer, you need a major band-aid, that's the place to go. But that
Okay.
same toolkit, the same thinking and same modalities applied to chronic disease, which is not an emergency. Chronic disease develops over time, and the reason why you cannot solve the problem in that healthcare system is because the answer is, what did you eat? What level of stress did you have? How poorly did you sleep? What toxic relationships are you in? These are the things that cause the inflammation that over time, eventually your body fails and gets sick. So if I had your DNA prior to what happened to you, I
Hmm.
could have told you that the genetics around your respiratory system are not good. Here's the nutrients you need to fortify that broken biology. I could have told you there's perhaps some detoxification pathway that's not working so well in your lungs. And so they're burdened by the pollution in the air that other people aren't as burdened by. So we can hyper
Sure.
personalize the exposures, environment, nutrition, lifestyle. What should your habits be, and what habits do you need to remove? And then all of a sudden, guess what? If you look at the physical structure of the human cell, it's designed to last 120 years. So our God-given gift is 120 years of life. That's how long we're supposed to live, and people do. If you go to the blue zones like Okinawa, Sardinia, etc., people get to 110, 115, 120 all the time because their habits are aligned to their local jurisdiction of a group of people that are of the local genome. It hasn't changed, and so they're living a long time. So we all need to relearn what that is because now we're scattered all over the world with
Sure.
genetic variability with the same exact habits.
So let me ask you, because I think that's very it's very unique to say, hey, well, everybody's wired to live 120 years old. I'm going on I'll be 49 this year, almost 50. So can somebody start like from, say, where I'm at? I'd like to think midpoint or let it in my mind. I'm like 16, man, but my body says otherwise, right? So can I start from where I'm at and
Yeah.
repair that moving forward?
So I'll use myself as the example. The
Sure.
body is regenerative in nature. It is designed to repair and heal. You have to have a certain state that prevents that from happening, either trauma or inflammation or autoimmunity. Something has to be going wrong at a terrain level where you can't heal. So in my case, what happened? At the time that I was very sick, 38 years old, 5 chronic conditions, 5 doctors, 5 medications. I did some biological age testing. So you can look for plaque in your aorta, you can look for cardiovascular stiffness, you can look for epigenetic expression and predict how much you've aged. So at the
Okay.
age of 48, I was 43 biologically. So I had advanced my age by 5 years, right? Because of
Okay.
how sick I was. Now, I started to do the work after understanding my genetic propensity towards things and biological failures and addressing them at an individual personalized level. And I got better. The fire of the diseases were gone, and I started to optimize and started to biohack and seek longevity. And I'm now 44, and my
Okay.
biological age as tested is 33. So
Wow.
not only did I stop that progression of advanced aging, not only did I get those 5 years back, I also added another decade. And I'm 33 on the inside, and I've been 33 for 3 years now on the inside, right? So, in as much as
Crazy.
damage is done, the body's designed to heal. Just need to know how to do that.
So let me ask you, when you're saying, "Hey, I'm 33 on the inside for 3 years," another tongue-in-cheek comment. I have a buddy that his mom was born in a leap year, and so he always used to joke that him and his mom were 12 together. But
Yeah.
like with what you're saying, it's like you almost can you can hit that approach. So when you're saying you're 33, is there an easy way to sum this up? Like, because we're having discussion here, what are some habits that you would tell for everybody, like, hey, here's some habits that need to change? What are two or three things maybe that you do? uh and then last, and I know I'm asking a bunch of questions all in succession, so I'll re-ask them. uh but then also, I'm curious how you find that age. You're saying a bio age testing, is that something that you offer, something that you're able to do?
Yeah, I do it, but there's lots of great companies that do it now. It 5 years ago, very hard to find. You
Okay.
had to do a lot of work to actually calculate the number, and now there's all these amazing tools and apps that do it. And I can tell you a few, but um, there's yes, we do one, but I would say the best one out there right now is called True Age.
True age.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's from a company called True Diagnostics, and so it's much deeper, more comprehensive. But I'll also warn you, that you need somebody that knows how to interpret it. It's a lot of data, right? So you
Okay.
have to find, and typically the way you order it is through some kind of functional clinician, right?
Sure.
And what it's looking for is how are your genes expressing? So your genes are of a certain variety, and that's hard coded. So the way you make hormones, the way you detoxify, that's a set rule in your genetics, and we all have a little bit of difference in those things, which is why we look different, which is why we behave different.
Sure.
Now there's inputs. You may have eaten a food, seen a stress or something that causes a change in the expression of the gene to give you exactly what you needed in that moment temporarily. So the
Okay.
measure of that expression, which is ongoing in a system called methylation, which we don't need to understand, but that's a system that's been measured, is a very good predictor of how old you're on the inside in the context that we're supposed to live to 120,
Okay.
right?
That's wild to me. So what for you, where did you start once you said, okay, hey, I
Yeah,
found this? What are one or two or three things that you could advise anybody, at a high level? Because keep in mind, this is, as we go through this podcast, this is sort of friend advice. We're not at
sure.
that coaching or deep medical advice. But where does somebody start?
So let me give you two examples from me that I
Okay.
think will resonate with a lot of people. And then I'll give you if you didn't have your genome, here's the general stuff that everybody should be doing today, right?
Okay.
So as an example, here's a couple things I discovered. There's a gene called GSTM1. It is a
Okay.
primary first line of defense for your gut. So when you eat, the toxins, pesticides, chemicals, plastics, everything that comes along with that food are meant to be detoxified, pee them out, poop them out, sweat them out. That's how your body gets rid of stuff, right?
Okay.
This gene drives an antioxidant called glutathione to go do that work, scavenge, find these toxins, remove. I don't have the gene. It's missing from my genetic code. It doesn't even exist. So it's not even about what version, what variant. I don't do this job in my gut. So when I thought I was eating a healthy Mediterranean diet, which a new naturopath friend of mine told me to do, what I
Sure.
didn't realize in Toronto, Canada, where I live, because we have a short farming window because of the long winter, there's
Uh-huh.
chemicals that are used to dry grains and chickpeas and things so that the yield can be turned around faster and so they can be stored during the winter. And those chemicals for me were highly inflammatory because I didn't detoxify them. So my gut was completely wrecked. And that meant my gut was leaking, which meant these toxins were going through the rest of my body, causing inflammation everywhere, which is why I had eczema so bad that I couldn't even open my eye, right?
Oh, geez.
Now, somebody else that has a good version of that detox gene could have had the exact same habits as me and never got sick because they did detoxify what Health Canada or FDA says is safe because they tested on the mass population, not on me, right? So this another big thing I learned, which in terms of leadership, this is a big deal in terms of cognition and executive function, how your brain
Sure.
works. So there's a bunch of neurochemicals that we now understand how they drive your perception and your behavior. So dopamine is a very important neurochemical when it comes to leadership and building and motivation. Dopamine
Sure.
is how you seek satisfaction. So when you eat some tasty food or achieve something, dopamine is deployed, bound in your brain, and you feel that wow moment, right?
Sure.
So the way I do this is there's a receptor in your brain that binds the dopamine. DRD2 is a gene that determines how many receptors you have, and I have the least possible, right?
Okay.
Then there's a protein called COMP that gets the dopamine out of your head because eventually you need to come back to your normal state. You're not in this pleasure seeking state forever. And
Right.
so I have, when the thing happens, that wow factor, bite into the pizza, I feel it way down here and it's gone like that. Before it even started, it's finished. So I am wired for depression because the world sucks, right?
Well,
But I'm
it's
also wired for addiction because once I find that thing that gives me pleasure, I need it again and again and again. But
sure.
I'm also wired for achievement because dopamine doesn't only power pleasure, it also powers reward. And you don't need both. You just need satisfaction from either source. And guess what? I have been through depression and I have been through addiction, and I'm now a high achievement oriented entrepreneur. And context was the difference. And now that I understand how my brain is wired, I'm no longer sick from burning out of seeking so much reward and taking so many risks and saying yes to every opportunity because I'm so reward seeking. It's never enough, right? So I was
Sure.
burned out. I was fried. My body couldn't keep up with my brain. So those, were two big ones for me. I can talk a straight hour about things I discovered about myself, but those are a couple big ones for me. Now, general advice for everyone.
Yeah.
What's making us sick? Food. We have a
Sure.
food system where the priorities on food design is shelf life, profitability, and flavor so that it's addictive. The vast majority of what you find in a North American grocery store is not food. It is filler that's addictive, right? The perimeter of like some groceries on the outside, maybe, but even that is so heavily sprayed, etc. So the more you can do about finding that local regenerative farmer, finding the farmer's market, buying pasture raised, organic, all of that stuff. Food is making everyone sick, especially if you live in North America, especially if you live in the United States.
So would you say it's worth, I mean, is that one of the major changes you made? You're saying, hey, find that farmer's market. Like you, that's that's one of the steps somebody can take right now to help them get more, I guess, aligned and
Yeah.
performing better overall. Okay.
If you don't know what I know about the specifics of your genome, that's one general thing you can do. Like for me, I even
Okay.
know how I metabolize starches, how I metabolize fats, what I do with beans and lentils, and I can be very specific based on my genetics about what I'm supposed to eat.
Sure.
But without going that far, keep it clean. If it's in a package,
So
don't eat.
no, that, and so my question is if you don't mind sharing, what does your diet look like then?
So
Like your
first of all,
daily,
it's very simple.
okay?
What I've learned is that, we live in a I order Uber Eats for breakfast and I order Thai food for dinner and sushi for like that is not how our body was meant to take in food. So if you go again, look at the people that have actually experienced longevity, their
Mhm.
habits around food are consistent and fairly simple. So what I eat eggs every single day, and the talk about cholesterol, all that is all nonsense, right?
Okay.
I'll eat 5 eggs in a sitting, no problem, and I'm healthy. I have no problem with that. I'll eat meat every day, and I will eat some form of carb, but it's going to be a low dose. That's one thing I've learned. I don't metabolize starches well, and my insulin response just genetically doesn't work. So
Okay.
where I used to be in a constant carb crash coma, I'm now thriving mentally because I know what dose to eat. So it's always a little bit of rice, some form of protein, and I eat a lot of eggs, a lot of red meat, and a lot of colorful plants. I don't eat the greens that much. The kale, the
Mm,
spinach, the broccoli. I
okay.
eat I eat purple, orange, yellow. That's where you get the nutrients from that your body needs. The green stuff,
Okay.
they're actually spinach and kale are leaves. They're not vegetables. We're not supposed to eat them.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
it's so wild because I'm sitting taking this in, because one of the things, and I'm just relating to this as some of the stuff that I've gone through in the last couple of years. Yeah, and because we got to talk about what we know, right? And one of the things that, like, as you're talking about the nutrients and the nutrition, and even recently, because again, I went through a couple years that it was just a funk. After you go through that big crash,
Yeah.
like you said, hey, emergency medical is important. And I was still continuing the same diet that I had. I kept trying to do the same workouts. And one of the things, like, I had this muscle atrophy that was just terrible. And what's wild, probably 6 months ago now, I connected with just an awesome gal. She's sort of an accountability partner. Her and I go back and forth. And that was one of the first things that she said also was, hey, your diet's all jacked up and you got to do this. And she went through all this stuff that, like, in my mind, as an adult, I thought I thought I knew, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So hearing you reiterate this now, and then during this journey, I watched somebody else, and I wish I could remember the guy's name. He was on an episode of I think Impact Theory, and talking about um, he says, oh, I don't do anything but fruits or fresh vegetables, similar to what you're saying, before
Yeah.
noon. And so I changed my diet to do that. Like no cereal in the morning, no, bagel and cream cheese, that kind of stuff, like normal, quote unquote, good American diet, right? Uh, um, and even now, like, cognitively, I feel so much more momentum and
Yeah.
connection and so forth, just from making some of these little changes. And I'm probably still way off the mark. If you were to look at me, you'd be like, dude, you're still a hot ass mess. But as far as just making some of those changes, that I think it's so valuable that you're sharing that, because I don't think we realize that. And often,
Yeah.
even when we think we're eating healthy, it's just not.
Yeah. And it's not, so the by individuality is also important. What does healthy mean? Like, I'm going to go be a vegan, it's good for my heart. What if you don't make the enzymes to break down proteins from plants, and you're going to struggle after a couple of years? So knowing what your body actually needs, big deal. But
Mhm.
healthy is just keeping it simple. If the world fell apart tomorrow and you had to start a farm, what would you eat? You'd probably eat eggs, some vegetables. You'd kill a chicken once in a while. But it's simplicity and consistency. Your gut microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, also seeks some level of consistency because it's populated to deal with what you eat. And if you change the story every single day, it creates confusion that you can't keep up with. And your gut micro, 85% of your immune system is in your gut. So if you're going to mess with that, you're going to cancer, viruses, etc. Everybody has cancer all the time. Your immune
Mhm.
system is constantly fighting it, right? So these things are all interwoven and interconnected, and this is why thinking about one system or one symptom doesn't work. You have to think holistically about the body.
So do you think this affects, and I'm asking this is going to come in from like way left field, but I grew up with terrible allergies all of my life. How
Yeah,
does this stuff affect somebody that has allergy? I mean, because that was one of the things, the solution, I'm growing up in the late 70s, early
yeah,
80s, and they're like, oh, you have allergies? Yeah, don't eat that, and then come in and get shots every week. And it was
yeah,
terrible, right?
yeah.
So what's the better solution? Can you do you, and this may seem silly, but like, can you cure allergies? Do you still need to avoid that
Yeah.
stuff? What's the
So
approach?
we grew up in the generation, right? So
Hmm.
I'm a couple years younger than you,
Hmm.
where I grew up in the exact same time, and I had horrible allergies growing up,
Hmm.
and I don't have them anymore. And I should. If I have an allergy, how do I not have it anymore? That
Right.
means I never had an allergy, because an allergy means I can't tolerate it. Why can I all of a sudden tolerate it?
Hmm.
So you have to first understand, and this would have been when I was talking about general advice, this would have been number two.
Okay.
Understand the landscape. That in the 1970s and 80s, we had about 140,000 chemicals added to humanity for processing, mostly for food, for fire retardants, for plastics, for you name it, whatever we deal with that is now convenient. Over 140,000 chemicals were added that we then got exposed to. We did
Jeez.
not change as human beings. Our genetic ability to detoxify those things are the same. Now the liver and the kidney are burdened. So
Hmm.
when you have a bucket that you're able to fill of all the toxins you can handle, and it's already overloaded, just trying to live in your home, where there was a study that came out 2 months ago from a Dutch university that says indoor air quality of North American homes is now 4 to 5 times worse outdoor. Why? Because by the time you think about your fabric softener, your personal care products, soap, shampoo, your sprays and chemicals, your dry cleaning that's hanging in the closet, all these chemicals in a drywall box that doesn't breathe, that
Hmm.
you're bringing in, the air quality is super toxic, worse than breathing the pollution outside, even if you're in a city. And this is the
Sure.
result of the study, right? So that stuff all got added in around that time when you and I were growing up. And so
Sure.
what we think of as allergies, yes, this thing was the final insult. The egg is what triggers the reaction, right? But
That's
because you
horrible.
were already 85% of the way there. And the egg triggers a reaction in every human on this planet. But they're at 10% and gets them from 10 to 15, there's nothing to feel.
Sure.
So the total toxic burden was too high. Our anti-inflammatory systems, our uh, detox systems are already overloaded. Our
Hmm.
generation was the first to start getting multiple vaccinations. You
Uh-huh.
know, there was useful vaccinations.
Sure.
Now, in the American healthcare, well, education system, there's 86 vaccinations on the childhood schedule.
Yeah.
Do you remember getting 86?
No, well, here, if we can go down the rabbit hole on that for just a second. I know I didn't get 86. Like, we were worried of a few, and then it was like, if you stepped on a nail, you got a tetanus shot, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
the the what's wild about this, and it is a rabbit hole, and I will tell everybody and anybody, like, what you're saying now. My wife started researching because with I have three kids. My oldest is mid 20s. It was even a significantly different schedule with him. My daughter's 12, And it's like every time you turn around every week, they're, oh, you need another vaccination. We're like, no, we're not having it. We're done. You
Yep.
know?
So then some people listening might say, what's the big deal? This stuff is approved, safe, right? So I can tell you that the pharmaceutical company that does the research that says this active molecule is safe is correct. Their research is correct. But the parent that says it was the day after I did this stuff that my doctor started telling me that my child is autistic is also correct. That's the day they changed. So what's going on? When you study the active molecule, you're not studying the lead, mercury, aluminum, and all the heavy metals that are delivered in the serum along with that product. And when you look at something like the Environmental Protection Agency, which has like guidelines around what's safe, if you take any of these individual shots, they're safe. Add 86 of them together, and you're many, 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 many fold the total upper limit of toxic exposure to heavy metals. And you wonder why all these kids suffering in brain inflammation are being told they have autism when all that they have is neural inflammation. You know, we have 2 generations ago, 1 in 10,000 kids was autistic. Last generation, 1 in 500. Now it's 1 in 34. And this is according to the CDC, 1 in 34,
Correct. Nope.
right?
We've done
So
the research
how
as
do we
well.
get there? Right. So how do we get there? It's not because the kids change. There's been no evolution. It's the input that's changed. So this tells you it's not a disease, it's caused. So, anyways, going back to the allergies,
No, it's
one of the
wild,
major
man.
sources. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I cut you off at that last sentence. What'd you say?
No, I was saying one of the major reasons why there's immunocompromisation and high inflammatory levels, which is why a child can get triggered so easily and then get labeled with an allergy.
It's what's crazy is as you're talking about this, the last time I probably, and I'd like to think of myself as a relatively healthy person, right? And also a high performer. When you were talking about the dopamine thing, I'm gonna have to go back to that eventually because I got into the car business right back in 2004, and like that was one of those highs, right? Oh, sold a car, high five,
Yeah.
yeah, right. All of a sudden, and like it you're right, it becomes addicting. So anyway, when I'd gotten into the car business and after I'd been in it a few years, one of the things that changed, and like hindsight gives you such perfect vision. As you're talking right now, I'm thinking back in my youth going, man, I had been playing hockey, I'd been doing all of these things, working out at the gym, and then changed careers, and I was at a desk where I was maybe not ordering Uber Eats, but it was like fast food all the time. And what's crazy is I think I'd been in the car business about 5 or 6 years, and I had a single solitary nut. I hadn't had an allergic reaction since I was like 16 years old.
Mm.
I had a single solitary nut at Christmas that was covered in toffee. I stole it from my building assistant. I mean, she gave it to me, in fairness. She's like, no, you can have this. And complete anaphylactic shock, complete body shutdown. And it's like, I'm thinking now as we're talking, like that was from that 5 or 6 year. I had generally lived a relatively healthy lifestyle, probably let my body
Mm.
excrete all the stuff, get rid of all the bad stuff because I was so active and doing the stuff. Well, you slow down for that period of time, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, gotcha, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so wild because then since that time, also as I've been married, my wife cooks mostly at home. Again, I'd like to think of ourselves as a relatively healthy family, but even as you're chatting, I'm like, man, there's probably some other things we could do. So, um,
And that what you just said is fairly
yeah.
consistent with you hear like sedentary lifestyle is no good. Why? You have a system in your body called your lymphatic system, and this
Hmm.
system is meant to drain toxins and push them out and eventually get you to get them out of your body. And a lot of your lymphatic system gets activated through movement. So your breathing compresses the lymphs of the stomach and the gut area. You know, the push-ups, the movement, the pulling, the pushing, all of that
Hmm.
stuff. Your body is designed to respond. And if you're sedentary, it's like, well, I guess you didn't get exposed to anything, nothing to detox. Meanwhile, you're eating McDonald's all day. So there's a lot to detox, right? So
Sure.
that's why sedentary. And so your story, same similar outcome for many, many people. I stopped moving and I stopped eating properly. I got sick.
Sure. Well, and I remember similarly, like the goofy thing is, I think as Americans, like we hear that, we agree with it, we try and fix it, but then it's so easy to fall back into that lifestyle,
Yeah.
isn't it? Um, so let me ask you too, because one of the things that you were talking about when we were talking about leadership topics and so forth, and I find this absolutely fascinating. I'm really thankful that took the time to sit here and visit with me about a lot of this. Um, how does then, your environment, the nutrition, the lifestyle, how does that translate into, leadership and management, clarity of mind? In theory, we all say, well, yeah, gosh, Mike's asking a dumb question. Like, of course, if I'm healthier, I should be able to perform better at work. But how do you get to start to put that in practice? And then you had made a comment here that, how somebody's cognitive profile and how that affects, high performers and leaders. And you've studied that down to a DNA level. So can you expand on some of those items for me a
Yeah.
little bit?
So I would say step one, it starts with the mind and your nervous system. So for example, our executive team, we know
Mhm.
our genetics, so we actually know how we fit together as a team. And where there used to be conflict, it doesn't exist in New York. So in as much as I have the very low dopamine and the reward-seeking, risk-taking behavior, one of our co-founders is the opposite. He has the maximum expression of dopamine, a very slow clearance. So go into a meeting, it's like, here's what we're doing, guys, and I'm very anxious about it. I'm very detail oriented about it. He's like, yeah, got it. Walk out of the room, and he's like on Facebook, texting his friends, watching a YouTube video. Like, don't you see the urgency here? He's like, yeah, don't worry, I got it, because he's content. So he
Sure.
because dopamine is so easy for him because he's constantly stuck in a state of pleasure and reward. He doesn't need it. He's not pursuing it. But give this guy the thing that gives him an elevated sense of reward, give him that feeling that he doesn't normally get, he ends up binging. Because the clearance is so slow, it's hard for him to stop that pleasure loop. So we now know who we are. I am the anxiety-driven, anxious, execution guy, and
Mhm.
he's the high quality, deep thinking, come back with 100 pages of paper type of guy, right? So
Sure.
planning, strategy, deep risk adverse thinking, execution. And now we know how we fit and the team gets better. So knowing that, you remove the stressors and you find your superpower and you thrive, right? So that's the first place we start as a brain. Then we
Okay.
start on the nervous system itself, because most of us have been through some sort of trauma, anxiety, major stressor in our life. Like, for example, what you went through,
Mhm.
you may not see it as a trauma, but your body does. Your body took it as major, major threat. What just happened,
Yeah,
right? And so there's an
absolutely.
association there where our body very intelligently learns what the traumas are in order to avoid making those mistakes in the future. So when you hear the word COVID, when you hear a respiratory system, when you see a hospital, whether you feel it or not, and with your DNA, I can tell you if you feel it or not, as a
Sure.
minimum, your genes are expressing trauma, avoidance, elevated nervous system. And if there's enough of these things going on, your body gets stuck in a fight or flight mode as opposed to a rest and recovery mode. And then it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what supplements you're taking, it doesn't matter what food you're eating, it doesn't matter what exercise you're doing, you're still gaining weight, you still feel bad because you're stuck in lack of recovery,
Mhm.
right? So unwinding the trauma and letting that go. And what's the easiest way to do that in a nutshell is the same part of your brain that experiences anxiety, stress, and trauma is
Mhm.
also where you express gratitude and forgiveness. And your
Okay.
brain cannot do both at the same time. So if you can
Interesting.
take that thought or that feeling or that scenario and associate some level of forgiveness, like for example, life-changing event. I
Sure.
thought I was dead, right?
Yep.
Your perspective has probably changed. So in as much as that feels horrible, it's also something you can thank and have gratitude for, because I now behave the way I do. I probably wouldn't, and I'd be in a very different place if I didn't have this life-changing event. So being able to have gratitude around it changes it, and
Sure.
that's something that most of us need to do. So that's our nervous system. Third layer is the gut. Almost everybody, if you live in North America and if you haven't been ultra careful about what you're doing with food, your gut probably needs some level of repair. And it's either the gut wall itself that may be damaged and atrophied and leaking to some degree, which means like toxins from your food literally exit the gut wall straight into your blood, or the gut microbiome may need some level of reset or support. And both of these things equal immune system, which is the fourth area that needs to be worked on for everybody, which is, we now have 24% of deaths in the United States are from cancer. In the
Yep.
1900s, it was less than 1%. So we haven't changed. What's changed is our stress levels, our immunocompromisation from the bad food wrecking your gut, so the immune system can't fight the cancer, and the toxic exposure is causing a lot more inflammation. So knowing that, mind, nervous system, gut, and then immune system, you've dealt with a lot of the major systems that allows the terrain to now be in the right state to go conquer and do stuff. And then you get into the micros of your hormones, your metabolic pathways. What am I supposed to eat? What supplements am I supposed to take? What is my exercise supposed to look like? If I have bad mitochondrial function, I shouldn't be doing cardiovascular activity. I shouldn't be running on a treadmill. I worked with a very famous tennis player, like US Open, Wimbledon level tennis
Okay.
player. And this person was told while they were still in their peak of their career that they had a high cholesterol level and they needed to go take a drug for it. And they're like, how? All I do is exercise, eat perfectly, I have the best doctors, best trainers. How? What
Right.
they didn't understand is that the genetics of their mitochondrial function meant that all that cardiovascular training they were doing, which meant taking in a lot more oxygen,
Uh-huh.
which meant a lot more oxidant. Your body uses oxygen to make energy, but in the process of using oxygen to make energy, it makes an oxidant, which is an inflammatory toxin. It's like the smoke that comes out of it,
Okay.
right? We're supposed to detoxify that stuff. He didn't do a good job of that. So he was overloading his system with cardiovascular activity, got into what we call oxidative stress, has all these free radicals that he didn't detoxify. His cardiovascular hardware, he had very low quality. So with the genetics, we can predict the actual arteries, the linings of the arteries, how
Uh-huh.
resilient are they? And he had the like lowest grade quality that was highly prone to inflammation. So these free radicals cause inflammation here. The body's response, send a hormone called cholesterol to that location to fix the inflammation. Your body uses cholesterol as a way to fight inflammation. It's a very useful hormone. But
Sure.
when that cholesterol gets to a site with all this free radical activity causing the inflammation, it also gets damaged. It also oxidizes. And eventually you build a plaque. And then one day a doctor says, cholesterol level is high. I think you need a pill. Not asking anything around why did you get there? Right? So now the why is very clear for this guy. So we had to adjust his training. We had to add some nutrients and supplements to fortify his biology so that he actually could thrive in a tennis career. And guess what? He never needed medication. Right? So even this one scenario, this is where we get into, after doing all this stuff I said before, mind, nervous system, gut, immune system, now get into the micros of what is my unique problem and situation. And let's try to do some detective work of what that means for me.
That's phenomenal, man. That it's really phenomenal because I think especially with modern medicine, it is so common to, well, you need a pill, you need a
Yeah.
pill, you need a pill, and the so what you're saying is, like, in most cases you probably won't need a pill. You just need to know thyself, to thine own
Yeah.
self be true, right?
First of all, this is all preventable, right? If he
Mhm.
knew what I was saying to him earlier, he would have never got there. That's one big deal. Chronic disease is completely optional. It doesn't just turn on. It's caused. So that's one. Second, if you're in a disease state and if it's not overly progressed, most of it is reversible. We've taken hundreds of people off of cholesterol pills. In fact, thousands, I would say, at this point. So
Sure.
if you know why, and it doesn't matter what the disease is, the disease and the symptom is your body screaming to you, check engine light, something's going wrong
Right.
and I can't handle it anymore. And the inflammation is so high that this biological function isn't working anymore. And now it's turned into a disease that needs to be medicated if you want to manage the disease you found. Versus,
Sure.
let's ask why. How did I get
Sure.
here? And if you address the why, it unravels itself.
Get preventative. I have a very close friend who just recently, the last week, was in the hospital for, I don't know, several days, for almost a week, and he's like peak physical condition. Couple years younger than me, dude's still doing backflips and all kinds of ninja stuff that no, I cross my heart, like legit backflips, right?
Yeah.
and and he ended up in the hospital because he's like, oh man, I'm having this pain, I'm having this, and it was his kidneys. And it's similar to what you're saying, because he's like, well, you'd think I'm like super healthy and I'm doing all this stuff. How in the world is my body screaming out to do this at, he's probably 45, he's a little bit younger than me. And that, coupled with what you're saying, now makes complete sense. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, okay, well, that makes sense because there's some other genetic piece, something
Yeah.
missing. I want to go back here to the beginning. I know we're kind of coming to the tail end of our time here, but I'm curious because one of the things that, and I noted this down early and I forgot to ask it, Cash,
Yeah.
but that's what happens. I get so excited to have conversations with people, man, and I'm just sitting learning and I'm taking notes on
Yeah.
stuff over and over. Um, so one of the things that you said, hey, I didn't really have any formal training on this stuff,
Yeah.
right? If I heard you correctly. So where did you start? How did you get started? And I know that it came from your personal experience, but I'm talking like the actual educational piece. Where did
Sure.
you go after that to get that education?
So I got sick, healed myself. I found genetics was a powerful tool for me to help me answer all these questions in terms of why. I then um, found so much purpose in what I just experienced that when I went back to work, it felt empty. Like I had a startup marketing. I used to help technology startup companies go from zero to some level of success. Everything that they didn't know they needed. I was the entrepreneur they needed to help them, right?
Right.
And so great, it felt good, but it didn't feel like fulfilling purpose. Getting my mother, who had arthritis and was bedridden, out of bed and going to the gym, that felt like purpose. Getting my friend off of a cholesterol pill, that felt like purpose. And it was so overwhelming that I needed to do more. So I built a team. They literally sat on the dining table in my home and we researched the genome. I had a geneticist, a functional medicine doctor, a naturopath, and we started to look at all this stuff and build this crazy algorithm around how the body actually works and what we actually need to know. And in that, I learned a lot from them. I knew zero on day one. The big eureka moment where I was forced to learn what I know and now I teach, right?
Sure.
Um, is I our intention was always that our scientists would be the face of the company because they were the experts, right? And so for the first 2 years, nobody knew I was even associated. I was a CEO in the background running the company, never intending to be forward. So our chief scientific officer was the one doing all the speaking, talking, educating, promoting, all that stuff. And what I found was all the phone calls we were getting were like doctors and researchers saying, "Hey, can I buy some training?" And when I would speak to a millennial who had anxiety, they're like, "I have no clue what this guy's saying." And when I had a client here. So there's a chief technology officer of one of Canada's biggest companies, a telecom company, and
Okay.
his family had some issues with sensitivity to EMF, electronic pollution, right? So I went to visit them at their home, met with them. The guy told me one thing that changed the complete trajectory of what we're doing. He said, "I've been to every doctor. I have all the money in the world. I was like CTO of a massive 80,000 employee company. Money wasn't the problem, but nobody
Sure.
could solve the problem. In 1 hour, we figured out what he couldn't figure out in years, having spent literally a couple $100,000 on his family, right?" So he said, "What you have can change the world. You just need to make it easy." He said, "Your biggest challenge is it's too complicated. You need to make it easy." So that's the mission I went on. How do I make this if the tool was designed for me?
I love that.
And so I took over what the tool looks like. And I took over the check mark of if we were successful or not, because it wasn't meant to be designed for a scientist or a PhD. It was meant to be designed for me. I'm the end user,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
everything in that world is designed literally, you need to have a PhD to understand because PhD is designed for their own level, right?
Right.
And so now the information doesn't necessarily need to be different. It just needs to be actionable. I don't really care what a chromosome looks like. I don't care what allele means. I need to know what's wrong and how do I fix it. And if it's not that simple, the tool doesn't work, right? So that's what
Right.
got me talking because I needed to speak at a level where my level of education on the matter could understand it.
I think that statement you made right there, it's so relevant to so many pieces in life, right? What you're talking about. Well, two things that you made. One is keep it simple. I think we're so guilty as humans, we overcomplicate
Yeah,
stuff, right? Whether it seems to because we're trying to relate it to ourselves or we want to have some level of importance or whatever it is. It's so easy to overcomplicate stuff. And then the second thing, and I think it's just absolutely beautiful, man. You said, what's wrong and how do I fix it? I think
yeah,
if more people ask that simple of a question, seeking
Yeah.
a simple answer, man, that makes impact across all all kinds of industries, all kinds of
Everywhere,
businesses,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that's now how I think about everything we do, because everyone's at every level trying to overcomplicate, typically because of their own insecurities or ego.
Sure.
Right. And this is how professionals are wired. Like, here's the moat that makes you the expert. And I'm gonna indoctrinate you with insecurity and ego to make sure you stay in your lane and other people don't think they're welcome there.
Jeez. It's wild. Well, hey, we're 45 minutes in. I have really enjoyed this conversation, Cash. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to take us out? Any nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience here at the tail end?
Yeah, what I would say is what I've learned is everything you do, every choice you make, what you eat, what you breathe, who you talk to, is a choice between moving towards health or moving away from it. Everything you do, every micro step is a step towards longevity or a step towards losing a couple of years. And in that, understand that chronic disease is optional. There's nothing, there's no switch that turns on to cause any chronic disease. It's caused over a decade
Right.
from broken biology paired with the wrong exposures or lack of nutrients. And if you understood how your body was wired, you would know exactly what your plan should be. And there's no reason why you should ever have a chronic disease.
Wonderful, man. And I think that's a very powerful statement also. Chronic disease is optional. I think people
Yeah.
then you have the opportunity to make the decision, to make those changes, have more energy, have more life, have more impact. I think that's wonderful. For everybody tuned in and listening to the show, again, I will remind you, check out Kashif Khan's Instagram. That's where he was saying you post webinars weekly
Yeah.
and
So if anyone
programs.
wants to dive deeper into how to do this type of work, go to my Instagram. First of all, I have a ton of videos there where you can learn a lot about what's actually making people sick. And, the conspiracy theories get debunked and some of them get proven. So there's
Sure.
a ton there for you to learn. But if you go to the link in my bio, there's a registration for a webinar where we go deep into how to do this type of work. Like, how would you actually discover this about yourself? So I would say anyone here that feels interested, click register on the webinar and you're going to learn a lot.
Absolutely. So he's at Cash Khan Official. That's KashKhanOffical. Cash Khan Official on Instagram. Just really great information, Cash. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insight, and just the way you present is so genuine. It's really appreciated, man.
No, thank you, man. Pleasure to be here.
If you would just hang out for a minute, I'm going to go ahead and take us out. Okay.
All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, like I said, we try and have amazing guests every single week, different verticals of business. I just can't say enough. I really like getting into conversations like this, and Cash has such a wealth of information to share that I sit and relate it to my own life, that it's just so relevant. And some of the things he says, even though it may seem so simple, I think that's the beauty behind it. Is it's so simple. Just grab a hold of that and follow through on those things. I would definitely say check out his Instagram, and do me a favor, everybody, as you're listening to this show, when you know somebody that this is going to impact, a couple of things. One, throw some thumbs up on it. I always ask, right? Share some thumbs up, share some hearts, whichever platform that you may be consuming this information on. But most importantly, if you know of somebody that could benefit from this information, share it with them. Share Cash's Instagram, share this episode of the podcast, share the other episodes of the podcast. That's one of the ways that we grow and we're able to make an impact, and allows you to grow yourself. And like I said, grow the people around you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in with me today. Until we speak next, stay great. We'll talk soon, everybody.